Sherlock Holmes Investigates The Blue Carbuncle, Part 1 by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I visited my friend Sherlock Holmes 2 days after Christmas. When I arrived, he was sitting on the sofa in front of the fire. Next to the sofa was a wooden chair, and on the back of the chair was a dirty old hat. A magnifying glass and a forceps were on the chair, so the hat was probably part of one of Holmes's investigations. "You're busy," I said. "Am I interrupting you?" "No, not at all," he replied, and indicated the hat. "The problem is very simple, but it is still interesting and maybe even instructive." I sat down in an armchair and warmed my hands in front of the fire because it was very cold outside. "I imagine," I said, "that this hat is connected with a terrible crime." No crime," said Sherlock Holmes, laughing. "Do you know Peterson, the commissionaire?" "Yes." "This hat belongs to him." "It is his hat?" No, he found it. He does not know who the hat belongs to. Look at it carefully, and not as a dirty old hat, but as an intellectual problem. It arrived here on Christmas morning, together with a good fat goose. That goose is probably cooking at Peterson's house at this very moment. These are the facts. About 4 o'clock on Christmas morning, Peterson was returning from a party along Tottenham Court Road. In front of him, he saw a tall man carrying a white goose over his shoulder. Then he saw some men attack the tall man. One of the attackers knocked the man's hat off, so the man lifted his walking stick to defend himself. But when he lifted the stick, he broke the shop window behind him. Peterson ran to help the man, but when the man saw Peterson with his commissionaire uniform, he thought he was a policeman and he ran away. The attackers ran away too, and Peterson was there all alone with the hat and the goose. "Of course, Peterson then gave the goose back to his owner," I said. "No," replied Holmes. "That is the problem. It is true that for Mrs. Henry Baker was written on a small card attached to the leg of the goose, and that the initials HB are written inside the hat. But there are thousands of Bakers and hundreds of Henry Bakers in London, and it is not easy to discover which Henry Baker it belongs to. So what did Peterson do? He brought both the goose and the hat to me on Christmas morning, because he knows that I am interested in even the smallest problems. I kept the goose until this morning, and then I gave it to Peterson to cook for dinner. I am keeping the hat for the unknown gentleman." "Did the man who lost the goose put a notice in the newspaper?" "No." "Then how can you discover who he is?" I asked. "From his hat," replied Holmes. "You can't be serious. What can you learn from this dirty old hat?" "Here is my magnifying glass," replied Holmes. "You know my methods. Look at the hat and see what you can discover about the identity of the man." I took the hat and looked at it carefully. It was a very ordinary round black hat. It was very old, and inside I could see the initials HB. There was a hole in the brim for a hat securer, but there was no elastic. It was very dusty and dirty in several places, but the owner had tried to cover these dirty places with black ink. "I can see nothing," I said, and gave the hat to Holmes. "On the contrary, Watson, you can see everything, but you do not reason with what you see." "Then please tell me what you can deduce from this hat," I said. "Well," said Holmes as he looked at the hat carefully, "I can see that the man was very intellectual and that 3 years ago he had quite a lot of money, but that recently he has had problems with money. He had foresight in the past, but much less now, which means he has some problem. He probably drinks too much. This is probably the reason why his wife has stopped loving him." "My dear Holmes!" "He has, however, kept some self-respect," continued Holmes. "He stays at home and goes out very little. He is totally unfit, is middle-aged, has grey hair which has been recently cut, and he uses hair cream. These are the main facts. Also, I don't think he has gas lighting in his house." "You're surely joking, Holmes." "Not at all. Don't you understand how I deduced these things?" "I am certain that I am very stupid," I replied, "but I don't understand. For example, how did you deduce that this man was an intellectual?" To answer me, Holmes put the hat on his head. The hat was too big for him and covered his eyes. "It's a question of volume," said Holmes. "If a man has such a big brain, he must have something in it." "How do you know he has less money now than in the past?" "This kind of hat first came out 3 years ago. It is a hat of the very best quality. If this man had enough money to buy such an expensive hat 3 years ago, but he has not bought another hat since then it is clear that he has much less money now." "Well, that is clear enough, certainly, but how about the foresight?" Sherlock Holmes laughed. "Here," he said, pointing at the hat securer. "Hat securers are never sold with hats. This means that he ordered it, which is a certain sign of foresight. But since he has not put in some new elastic after the old one broke, this means that he has less foresight than before. But he has tried to hide some of the dirty marks on his hat with ink, which means he has not completely lost his self-respect." "Your reasoning is certainly very good," I said. "That he is middle-aged, that his hair is grey, that his hair has been recently cut, and that he uses hair cream can all be seen by looking closely at the inside of the hat. With the magnifying glass, you can see the short pieces of grey hairs cut by a barber's scissors. They stick to the hat, and there is the distinct odour of hair cream. Also, you will observe that the dust on the hat is the soft brown dust you find in houses, not the hard grey dust you find in the streets. This means that the hat is kept inside the house most of the time, and that he doesn't go out very often. Also, you can see the marks of sweat on the inside of the hat, which means he sweats a lot. A man who sweats so much can't be very fit." "But his wife, you said that she stopped loving him." "This hat has not been cleaned for weeks. When a man's wife lets him go out in such bad condition, it means that she doesn't love him anymore." "But maybe he isn't married," I said. "No, he was bringing the goose to make peace with his wife. Do you remember the card on its leg?" "You have an answer for everything. But how did you deduce that he doesn't have gas lighting in his house?" "Well, if you saw only 1 or 2 marks of wax on a hat, it could be by chance, but I can see at least 5 on this hat, which means that this man must use candles very frequently." "Well, you're very clever," I said, laughing. "But since a crime has not been committed, All this seems to be a waste of time. The Blue Carbuncle Part 1 Summary. Sherlock Holmes is given a hat and a goose by Peterson. He deduces the background of the hat owner just by looking at the hat. Watson thinks he is very clever, but it is a waste of time as there is no crime committed.